Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to explore a truth that is rarely spoken, yet universally felt. The secret to unlocking not just physical pleasure, but intimacy so profound it transforms the bond between two people. We live in a world obsessed with quick answers and techniques, but the real secret lies deeper in psychology and trust, in surrender, and in meaning. What I will share with you is not simply about pleasure, but about creating an experience so powerful it imprints itself on the soul. When we talk about pleasure, most people immediately think of the physical act itself, the touch, the stimulation, the moment when things finally happen. But the truth is, the real foundation of explosive, transformative intimacy begins much earlier than that. It begins in the mind. And if you don't understand the psychology of anticipation, then you miss out on the most powerful dimension of desire. Anticipation is not just a waiting game. It's a profound psychological mechanism that shapes the entire human experience of pleasure. Think about it this way: the brain is the largest sexual organ. Long before the body responds, the mind is already building images, creating narratives, and layering expectations. That's what makes the eventual experience feel like an eruption rather than a flicker. Anticipation heightens the senses, magnifies every touch, and stretches out desire until the simplest gesture can ignite the most overwhelming response. If you want to truly understand this, you have to look at how human beings are wired for meaning. We are creatures of stories, patterns, and rituals. The waiting, the gradual build-up, makes the endpoint valuable. Consider how even in everyday life, the things we wait for hold more significance. A meal tastes better when we've been hungry. A victory feels sweeter when we've struggled. It's the same with intimacy. The longer the anticipation is nurtured, the more explosive the release becomes. Now, what does this mean in practice? It means that the secret isn't always about doing more faster or harder. Sometimes it's about deliberately doing less, pulling back, teasing, pacing. It's about creating a rhythm that keeps the mind engaged, that keeps him guessing, that keeps the body and the brain locked in a kind of dance of desire. You aren't rushing toward the finish line. You're guiding him through a journey where every step matters. This is where self-control and awareness come into play, because anticipation is a psychological amplifier, but only if you know how to wield it. If you move too quickly, you cut off the crescendo before it even begins. If you move too slowly without intention, you risk losing. The tension is in knowing when to give, when to hold back, when to let him think he's on the edge, only to pull him back into the current of the experience. That is what turns a simple act into something unforgettable. And here's where it goes even deeper. Anticipation isn't just about arousal, it's about trust. When a man feels that you understand the rhythm of his desire, that you're guiding him rather than simply reacting, he relaxes into the experience. He no longer feels the pressure to control, to direct, to perform. He can surrender, and that surrender is the very doorway to explosive pleasure. Without anticipation, without the psychological build-up, there is no real release. There is only a quick reaction, a biological reflex. But with it, there is transcendence. This principle is universal. In every meaningful area of life, the things we desire most deeply are the things we wait for, the things that demand patience and discipline. It's the same in relationships. When you understand anticipation, you're not just creating physical excitement. You're sending a messaging: you are worth the wait. This experience matters. This bond is not cheap or rushed. And that message carves itself into his memory. Long after the act is over, he remembers not just what you did, but how you made him feel. That's the difference between ordinary and extraordinary intimacy. Ordinary intimacy satisfies a moment. Extraordinary intimacy creates an imprint that lingers for days, weeks, even years. And the bridge between the two is anticipation. It transforms pleasure into a story, into an event that he will return to in his mind and again, fueling his desire for you beyond the physical, anchoring it in the psychological. So, when you think about the secret to explosive pleasure, don't only think of technique. Think of anticipation as the invisible architecture that gives shape and meaning to everything else. It is the silence between the notes that makes the music beautiful. It is the hunger that makes the feast satisfying. It is the waiting that makes the arrival profound. Master anticipation and you master the mind. Master the mind and you unlock the body. And once you've unlocked both, you've discovered the true foundation of explosive, unforgettable intimacy. Because in the end, pleasure is not just about what happens in the moment. It's about everything that leads to it, everything that surrounds it, everything that makes it meaningful. And that begins always with anticipation. If anticipation lays the foundation, then attunement is the structure that rises from it. And this, perhaps more than anything else, is where most people fall short, because we live in a culture obsessed with technique, lists, tricks, step-by-step formulas, the one move that promises guaranteed results. But intimacy is not a performance where you recite memorized lines. It is an unfolding dialogue, and the real secret is not in what you do, but in how well you listen. Every man's body speaks its own language. His breath, the tension in his muscles, the subtle sounds he makes. These are not background noise, they are the script. And if you are paying attention, they tell you everything you need to know. To be attuned is to treat intimacy as a living conversation, one where you are not trying to impress, but to respond. It is less about delivering a perfect routine and more about discovering moment by moment the rhythm that unlocks his deepest desire. That requires humility, because it means admitting you don't already know. You can't approach intimacy with the arrogance of, I've mastered this. You have to approach it with the curiosity of, show me who you are and I will meet you there. Attunement is a form of respect. It is saying, I see you, I hear you, I am responding to you. And nothing intensifies pleasure more than the experience of being fully seen and fully received. Think about how this principle plays out beyond the bedroom. In every meaningful human relationship, listening is the foundation of connection. We don't bond with people who only talk at us. We bond with people who listen, who notice, who respond. The same truth applies here. If anticipation prepares the ground, attunement is the water and sunlight that make it come alive. Without it, the experience feels mechanical. With it, the experience feels sacred. And here's the fascinating part: when you are deeply attuned, you create a feedback loop. The more you respond to his cues, the more he relaxes, the more authentic his reactions become, and the more he gives you to respond to. It becomes a cycle of rising intensity, like a spiral drawing tighter and tighter until the climax is inevitable and overwhelming. But that only happens if you are paying attention. If you are tuned to his frequency instead of staying trapped in your own head. This is where many people fail. They get lost in performance anxiety. They're worried about whether they're doing it right, about how they look, about whether it's good enough. And in that state, they are cut off from attunement. They are no longer listening. They are self-conscious. But when you let go of that, when you stop trying to perform and start tuning in, you suddenly unlock an intimacy that feels effortless, because it is guided not by technique, but by awareness. To be attuned is also to be adaptable. What electrifies one man might do little for another. What sends him to the edge today might not tomorrow. Desire is fluid. It shifts with mood, with stress, with context. If you rely on a static set of tricks, you will always fall short. But if you are listening, really listening, you will never be lost. because the body itself will tell you where to go next. And that adaptability is the difference between ordinary pleasure and extraordinary intimacy. There's also a deeper psychological truth here. When you are attuned, you are not just giving pleasure, you are affirming his humanity. You are saying, in effect, you matter enough for me to notice you. And that message cuts deeper than any technique ever could, because men, for all their bravado, are often starving for that kind of recognition. They want to be received not just physically, but emotionally. And when you give that, when you show through your attunement that you are with him completely, he experiences not only physical release, but an emotional connection that fuses the act with meaning. So, the power of attunement lies in its subtlety. It's not a flashy move or a clever trick. It's the quiet but profound discipline of listening, responding, and adjusting in real time. And when you combine that with the anticipation we spoke about earlier, the result is nothing short of transcendent. Because anticipation prepares the mind and attunement guides the body. And when mind and body are both engaged, pleasure is no longer just physical. It becomes unforgettable. And that is the challenge I leave you with. Don't just do. Listen. Don't just perform. Respond. Attune yourself, and you will find that the secret to unlocking explosive intimacy was never in technique at all, but in the simple, powerful act of paying attention. If anticipation lays the groundwork and attunement guides the journey, then the final threshold to truly explosive release lies in something most men struggle with deeply: surrender. And I don't mean surrender in a shallow sense, as if it's weakness. I mean a psychological letting go, a dissolving of ego where control gives way to trust. That's the doorway to the kind of orgasm that doesn't just relieve tension, but shatters him, leaves him undone, and ties him to you in a way he won't forget. Now, why is surrender so difficult, especially for men? Because masculinity is often built on the illusion of control. From a young age, men are conditioned to be strong, to hold themselves together, to master their environment, to suppress vulnerability, and all of that conditioning makes sense in many areas of life. It creates resilience, it drives ambition, it builds the capacity to lead. But in intimacy, the very same control that protects him in the world becomes the barrier that prevents him from experiencing the depth of pleasure available to him. That's why explosive release requires more than technique. It requires creating an environment where he feels safe enough to let go. Without trust, without admiration, without the sense that he can hand over control, without judgment or ridicule, he will hold back. His body might respond, but his mind will remain guarded. And when the mind is guarded, the body can only go so far. Think about what happens when ego is running the show. A man in his ego is still performing even in bed. He's monitoring himself, worrying about lasting long enough, about looking strong enough, of not being seen as too vulnerable. He is still playing a role. And as long as he is playing that role, he is holding back from the kind of surrender that produces release beyond anything mechanical. But when the ego dissolves, when he is able to trust you, to surrender into the moment, the experience becomes transformative. Suddenly, he's not just having an orgasm. He's entering a state where pleasure overwhelms the boundaries of control, where he is no longer managing or suppressing, but allowing himself to be consumed by the intensity. That's what people mean when they describe something as mind-blowing. It isn't just the body, it's the experience of the ego stepping aside so something greater can flow through. And here's the profound paradox: the stronger the ego is in everyday life, the more powerful the surrender becomes in intimacy. A man who spends his days leading, controlling, and bearing responsibility carries enormous psychological weight. For him to finally collapse into a space where he doesn't have to control, where he can give himself fully to pleasure, That is not just physical release. It is psychological healing. It's a kind of reset, a reminder that he doesn't always have to carry the armor. This is why the bond deepens so dramatically when surrender is achieved. Because what you are giving him is not just sensation, you are giving him freedom from his own ego. You are offering him a place where he doesn't have to be the leader, the provider, the strong one. For a brief moment, he can let it all go and be nothing but present. And that kind of experience imprints itself on his soul. He will remember not only the intensity of the release, but the fact that with you, he was allowed to be fully himself, stripped of ego, stripped of pretense, and still deeply accepted. So the real secret to explosive intimacy isn't just about pressure, pace, or technique. It's about guiding him past his ego into surrender, and that requires more than just skill. It requires your presence, your reassurance, your willingness to hold the space so that he feels safe enough to collapse into it. Because if he cannot trust you, he cannot surrender. And if he cannot surrender, he will never know what his body is truly capable of. This is why anticipation and attunement matter so much. They are the pathways that lead to surrender. The build-up through anticipation teases him to the edge, breaking down his defenses. The listening and responsiveness of attunement convince him that you see him, that he is safe in your hands. And together, they create the perfect conditions for the final step, the surrender of ego, the moment where he lets go completely. That is where the explosion happens. And if there is one truth to carry forward from this, it is this: the greatest pleasures in life are never found in control, but in the moments we dare to release it. What we've been circling around is this profound truth. Pleasure at its highest level is not simply about sensation. It is about meaning. You can master anticipation, you can learn to attune, you can even help a man surrender his ego. But if the experience is empty of meaning, if it's stripped of emotional resonance, it remains just that, an act. And acts, no matter how pleasurable or fleeting, they pass through the body and vanish. But when pleasure carries meaning, when it is rooted in something deeper, it becomes a bond. It is remembered, cherished, and it shapes the relationship itself. This is the difference between intimacy as entertainment and intimacy as communion. In one, you are giving a man a thrill. In the other, you are giving him a memory, and memories are what tie people together. Pleasure that is stripped of meaning is like sugar sweet but gone in a moment. Pleasure that is infused with connection is like nourishment. It feeds something that lasts. Now, what does that actually look like? It looks like playfulness that reminds him he is safe to be himself. It looks like reverence, the sense that you are not just touching his body, but honoring his vulnerability. It looks like genuine desire, not going through motions, not performing, but truly wanting him, being fully present in the moment with him. That's when pleasure becomes more than a release. It becomes a statement: you matter. This bond matters. What we share is not ordinary. And here's the irony. People often obsess over technique because they believe that's what creates unforgettable intimacy. They chase after new methods, new tricks, new secrets. But the reality is, the most explosive orgasms are rarely remembered for the technique. They are remembered because of what they meant. Because of the atmosphere, the connection, the emotional undercurrent. A man doesn't lie awake at recalling the exact physical details. He remembers how it made him feel. Did he feel adored? Did he feel seen? Did he feel like this moment was more than physical? That it touched something in his soul? This is where pleasure becomes transformational. Because in giving physical ecstasy, you are also writing a story into his memory. You are teaching him, perhaps unconsciously, that intimacy with you is not casual, it is significant. And significance is addictive. A man will chase significance far longer than he will chase technique, Because in a world that is loud, shallow, and full of empty pleasures, meaning is rare. To find it in intimacy is to find something holy. Notice how this ties back to surrender. For a man to let go of his ego, he must believe that what he is letting go into is safe, valuable, trustworthy. That assurance does not come from technique alone. It comes from the bond, from knowing that what is happening is not mechanical but deeply personal, that he is not just another body, not just another performance, but someone cherished. And that realization magnifies the pleasure because it gives it weight. It gives it gravity. It tells Haim, this is not just about your body, it's about us. And perhaps that's the point that most people miss. They think pleasure is about heightening sensation. But the real secret is about deepening significance. Because when significance is present, even the simplest touch becomes profound. And when it's absent, even the most elaborate technique eventually feels hollow. So the challenge is not merely to learn what to do. The challenge is to ask yourself, what does this mean? What do I want him to feel beyond the physical? How can this moment communicate devotion, playfulness, reverence, desire? When you answer those questions, not just with words, but with presence, you create the kind of intimacy that is unforgettable. And that is what bonds him to you. Because when intimacy is meaningful, when it is more than technique, more than sensation, more than ego, then it becomes irreplaceable. You could remove every trick, every method, every so-called secret, and he would still be bound to you. Not because of what you did, but because of what it meant. And that is the ultimate secret. Pleasure is not just about bodies colliding, it is about souls connecting. When you understand that, you stop chasing temporary highs and start creating permanent bonds. So let me leave you with this. Don't just aim to give pleasure. Aim to give meaning, because technique may fade, but meaning endures, and when pleasure carries meaning, it becomes more than explosive. It becomes unforgettable,